Good morning, Noblesville. It is Monday, June 1st. Happy June. And we are here with another edition of Mental Health Monday on a beautiful, sunny Monday morning in the city of Noblesville. I am joined once again by a good friend of mine, Kristen Boice of Pathways to Healing. Kristen, good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Jenson. Thanks for having me today.
Glad to have you with us. We weren't here last week as we celebrated Memorial Day with our friends and family, but we actually have a lot to cover today, and I'll be really upfront with the community that my heart's a little heavy today. My emotions are a little heavy today, and we're not only going to talk about COVID and relationships and thoughts around that. The events of the past week in the United States has really once again brought to life a real discussion on race relations and how that affects our own community here in Noblesville. So we're going to take some time today to talk about that and have an honest conversation. From day one, Kristen, you can hold me accountable to this. I said we're going to be honest. We're going to be very open. We're going to share our emotions. We're going to talk about tough stuff. And I think race relations is a tough conversation, but it's one that our community, I think, has to have. It's one that I've heard from so many people across our city that want to have it. So we're going to lean in on that today. So I appreciate your willingness to do so. If you're joining us online, make sure you shoot us a little note, say hi, say good morning. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you want to let it out, do so. Do so in the chat box. We'll react as we can here today. I'll admit before we get started that I am human. So bear with me as we go through this conversation today. And Kristen, I believe you're human as well. So bear with us as we go through this conversation. But let's get started in the way that I know Kristen Boice loves to get started, with a breathing exercise. And I'll let you take it from here, Kristen.
Yeah, let's come together as a community today and hold some space. We've had some heavy things go on all around the world and all around our nation. And let's hold some space, some compassion, and some grace today as we take our deep breaths and we honor those that have kind of gone before us and made the transition. Let's hold some space today. And it could be someone, we know we've had lost some people recently, and hold some space for those personal losses that you might have experienced today as we really honor this time together and come together with open hearts, open minds. So first, let's put your feet on the floor, kind of grounding your feet in the floor. We call this square breathing, and you can go at your own pace. I'm just guiding you in terms of how to start, and then after that, you go at your own pace. So we're going to inhale through your nose for 4. We're going to hold for 4. And then we're going to slowly release out our mouths for 8. And what this does is it helps calm the nervous system, get us centered, take us out of fight, flight, or freeze and fear and being paralyzed into the present moment so we can come together and connect. So let's handle whatever comes our way. So let's take a deep breath together. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Release for 8. Nice job. We're going to really release those shoulders down on that out breath. So feel your feet on the floor. Inhale for 4 through your nose. Hold. Release. Let's just take a moment to notice and feel and hold space. If you want to take another deep breath in, do so now at your own pace. And this is a tough time. We need to acknowledge that this is a tough time, and this is a chance for us to awaken. This is a chance for us to expand. This is a chance for us to deconstruct. And so let's just take this conversation, and you may feel triggered at certain points because we're not going to get it right, so to speak. And a lot of times we get afraid to speak up because we don't want to hurt anyone, offend anyone. So our intention is to come with open hearts, open minds. And if you do feel triggered by something, I invite you to take a deep breath, feel your feet on the floor, and try to breathe through the discomfort of it, and maybe write about it when we're done to get it out, because there may be something to explore within you that we want to tend to today.
It's great advice and great technique. Again, I use all the time to get myself centered and focused, and I've done that a lot over the past several days. Before we get to the topic of race relations in our city, I would like to chat a little bit about a school component. Today is the drive-through graduation for a lot of our seniors. We have, since the last time we've been on, Kristen, we have completed e-learning. Parents, you are our heroes. Congratulations, students. So let's talk a little bit about the emotions around that. Maybe Kristen, talk a little bit about how to handle maybe those parents who went from a structured e-learning situation to now a unstructured, maybe summer atmosphere while still living with the uncertainty of COVID-19. What does that look like? Maybe some tips for them. And then let's talk a little bit about those seniors today who are going through that final graduation drive-through, or those teachers who are closing that chapter. So let's touch on the education and component before we get to another topic here today.
First, I want to, the word for the day is acknowledgement, and it's going to be across the board. You're going to hear me say it on multiple fronts, multiple levels. And I want to acknowledge those seniors. I want to acknowledge the teachers. I want to acknowledge the parents. I want to acknowledge the grandparents. I want to acknowledge the administration, who all has made this come together today. They've worked super hard. I mean, this is the finish line, and you did it. And so first, let's take a moment just to go and notice that you finished, you did it, you achieved it. And I also want to notice we can hold space today for that excitement of the next chapter, and also hold space for the grief of it looking different. We can have both. I love the word and we can have space for both. So you may notice a moment of excitement, and then you may notice a wave of sadness that we're not doing it the traditional way. We're doing it a different way. And you can have space for both those feelings. So it's a time of change. It's a time of things are so different and feel so different, and that there are emotions that come with these differences. So for the seniors, I honor you, I congratulate you, and we all are so excited for your next chapter, whatever that may be. And we also know there's some sadness here that you don't get to walk across the stage the way you normally would have envisioned that. And same for the parents. It's okay to have your feelings about all this, and it's important that you're talking about it, you're sharing about it, you can write about it, and take the time today to be present. Take the time today to be present in the moment. So in the car, take the time to cherish the moment. Just be present through the breath. Go, I want to take this time so I know I was fully present for my kid. I was fully present with them to honor their experience. And then I can deal with my emotions on the side, but I want to make sure I'm present for them and their feelings. So those are really important pieces. And to say, how are you feeling today? Sweetie, maybe you don't call them sweetie. I call my kids sweetie, honey, sugar, pumpkin, whatever you call them. Maybe you just call them by their name. And you say, how are you feeling today? And they may say, fine. And then you go, thanks for sharing. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Don't put expectations on it. Let them share whatever it may be. They may be totally fine. Let them have that experience. You may not be, and that's okay too. We don't want to put that on them. So let them have their space to share how they feel. And then the second piece to this today is to take the time to really connect at a deeper level. And that means we have to be present. So connect to those around you, connect to the family, connect to the friends. If there's something you want to say, write it out in a card and give it to your loved one. If you want to give, him or her or whatever, you want to say something to them, say it today. Don't hold back. Say it today, please. Say what you want to say. Let them say what they want to say. Hold that space today to honor the process. And in terms of those kiddos that aren't graduating today, that are transitioning to summer, ask them how they're feeling. Check in. Now, it is harder with unstructured time, and we know things have changed. There's not those summer camps. Some folks aren't able to, we're not having a lot of the summer camps and the summer experience. Let this summer be a time of connection. Let this summer be a time of your presence. Let this summer be a time where you're going to be motivated to do some of your own work so you can free yourself, so you can be present as a parent. Honor your children's emotions. Let them have their feelings. Now, I'm not going to say it's not going to be hard at times. It is. Breathe through that discomfort. Ask for help. Reach out. Start reading things. Start listening to podcasts. and at the same time honor your own emotions of grief, that it does look different. So I hold space for the and. I'm very much right now encouraging for people to hold space for the and, for the grief and the process, for some moments of joy and then the moments of grief, which we're all going to have during this time.
Hold space. I like that. So I appreciate it. I felt like we had to address, we've talked so much the last several weeks about those graduates, those students, those parents, those grandparents who have gotten through the e-learning process. We had to talk a little bit about that today. But I want to pivot now and talk a little bit about race relations in the city of Noblesville. My emotions have been all across the board the last week or so. We saw 2 weeks ago the killing of a completely innocent black man in Georgia out for a jog. Last week we saw the murder of an unarmed black man in Minneapolis, and that certainly has stoked a lot of emotions in people. We saw this past weekend. We saw peaceful protests here on the square in Noblesville, which I was delighted to see. And we also saw different looting and rioting across some of the bigger cities. And so I can only imagine what people are feeling today. And I know personally, I have struggled with, how do we talk to our kids about this? So, Kristen, I want to touch on that here in a little bit. But let's talk about our own as adults emotion, the heated emotion that we have in the city of Noblesville about race relations. We've had groups of people talking for several years now about the importance of it. I know the Noblesville Diversity Coalition, for example, a lot of our pastors in our community have really helped up the conversation in the city of Noblesville about race relations, but it is really coming to the light here in the last several days across our city, our state, and our nation. So, Kristen, with that, I know that's a big, wide entry point to this very complex conversation, one that I'm going to just be raw and honest about as we go along here. So if you could kind of give me some guidance, Kristen, about how we should maybe confront it within ourselves. And then at some point in time, I do want to talk a little bit about how we parent with this, how we have conversations with our kids about this.
Yeah, first of all, I want to acknowledge this is a tough topic for everybody involved and a necessary topic to talk about. I want to acknowledge I'm a white female, so I need to say that out loud with privilege. And we've been using that word privilege, but when I've spent some time in my own life deconstructing that, I've never had to have someone afraid of me, when I walk into a store, or I've never had someone have to be afraid of me, when I'm jogging. And so there's something to be said about that. So I'm not the expert so I don't want to present that I'm the expert. So I want to make sure that's really clear that I'm not the expert. I'm just simply doing my own work to bring the conversation to light. And it's important that first we start and acknowledge the pain that has been here for a long time. That it's called pain. It's called grief. And when we can acknowledge that, we can start by looking at our own selves, our own conditioning, our own programming, our own upbringing, our own messaging that we've gotten throughout our lives. And it starts there. It starts by looking within to say, what are my biases? What are my fears? We have inferiority. And if you look at the word inferiority, what's in that word?
Fear.
F-E-A-R. Right in the middle of that word, like it's capitalized. There's fear. So inferiority, there's fear in that. And when we can acknowledge our own fears, when we can acknowledge our own biases, when we can acknowledge our own programming and conditioning across the board, we are all humans. We all have feelings and we all matter. And so when we can deconstruct, that starts with us. That's the first step. And that when you have feelings being brought up about what's going on, we've got to notice those. We've got to pay attention to those. The pain that people are feeling right now is insurmountable. It is, and we have to take a moment to acknowledge the pain. We have to take a moment to acknowledge the grief. We have to take moments to acknowledge what is really going on. What is the issue? And if we don't acknowledge it, it's like anything else. It's like if someone has an alcohol problem and they don't acknowledge it, we don't do anything about it. So it's like the first step. The first step is awareness and acknowledgement. If we don't do that, no one makes changes in their life. The alcoholic still keeps drinking. The person that has anger issues still stays angry. And when we look at the main emotion we're seeing is a lot of anger because we feel there's injustice. And so with anger, I always say, look underneath the anger. There's grief. Look underneath the anger. It's like that is the surface, and it can help us to propel us to make change. And there's so much more underneath that. There's so much more pain. There's so much more fear. There's so much more grief. And when we can acknowledge that the anger is part underneath that, what is really going on, we can start awakening. This is an invitation to awaken. This is an invitation to disrupt. This is an invitation to deconstruct. And it starts with each one of us. And if we have intense emotions around what's happening, we got to look at that. What is driving that? What is underneath that? And if we don't start with our own biases, if we don't start with our own conditioning and programming, the chances of us disrupting this are slim to none. It's like I said, it's any change, any type of change starts within, starts right here. It has to start here. And then from there, we can start moving it forward. We can start moving it externally. All change comes internally. All change first come internally. Then we can start going externally with really making a difference. So anybody that comes in for therapy or has anything going on in their life, the first step we start with is awareness and acknowledgement. We got to take responsibility and ownership. I have to take responsibility and ownership for my beliefs. I have to take responsibility and ownership for my emotions. I have to take responsibility for my behavior. I have to take responsibility for my biases. These all play a part in how we start having this conversation. And again, I'm not the expert, so I want to make that super clear. I'm not the expert. I just know humanity. I know human psyche, and I know a lot of this comes from pain, generations after generation after generation after generation of pain and biases and conditioning. So that's where we have to really start, is looking within, in my opinion. I mean, everybody's got their own opinion and can speak to this probably in a more effective way in terms of the race relations piece. I'm speaking about the humanity piece that is at heart, because we're all humans in this.
Well, exactly. And I think that's a very good point. I will go along with what you just said and say that, I am a white Republican from Hamilton County. So my experience is very different. And my ability to talk about that experience is very different. One of the challenges when I came into office was I wanted to understand, I want to constantly understand other perspectives. And we have several Black police officers, for example, and one of which I called in, we met one day just to ask honest questions to. And I asked him, can I be vulnerable with you and ask questions and maybe say things that maybe, get some guidance on. And I would encourage folks to find allies within your social circle that you can just be honest with, that have very different perspectives and say, I view it this way, or I think this way. Help me understand your viewpoint. And that has been a very uplifting conversation for me. And I've realized that those who are very different from me, whether it be in their skin color or their, you name it, any type of difference, are oftentimes open if you open yourself to them by saying, I don't have all the answers. So help me think this through and help me gain a new perspective. So I appreciate you talking from a humanity standpoint today. This is a continuation of a conversation we're going to have in this community. We have been having. It involves public safety. It involves humanity. It involves mental health. And that's why I felt like we needed to talk about it today. And so let's transition. I obviously have small kids, and we have wrestled with how do we talk to our kids about the violence that they're seeing on TV, for example. Last night, we had a small group from church over. The kids were all inside. All of a sudden, we saw them all glued to the TV, which never is a good thing. And so I ran inside, and of course, they had the news on, and there were shots of things going on in Indianapolis and Minneapolis and Miami, all across the country, different writing. And the questions there, you could just see it on their face, what's going on. And so can you talk a little bit, maybe not exactly, in terms of your expertise on how to talk about race relations with kids, but how to talk about these controversial issues, even broaching it with our children?
Yeah, it's an important topic First of all, you have to be clear again in your own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, because you can very quickly, if they're biased, if they're coming from a conditioned place, put that on your kids, and that's what creates generational patterns. So my first invitation is doing your own like kind of rumbling through, what do you believe, what do you feel, and without pushing that onto your kids, especially if it's been conditioned over the generations. Vulnerability, I like how you use the word vulnerability. So the first thing is, the news, what they're witnessing is pain. What they're witnessing is pain and fear and powerlessness and helplessness. And there's a powerless feeling here to make change, and they don't know any other way to do it. They've tried multiple ways. And so what I tell my kids, because we've had many conversations as this unfolds, because my heart is broken. And so I am going to talk about it. We are going to have conversations. The first thing I start with is taking a deep breath. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's the very first thing. I want to make sure I'm centered. I'm aligned. I'm not reactionary. I'm clear of what the words that I'm going to say are going to come out of my mouth. And so the first thing I say is, I'm sad. I said, I'm sad. I am heartbroken that this is happening, that someone innocently got killed, murdered, really. And so that first of all, that's heartbreaking. Second of all, I said, how do you feel? And I explained the situation. How do you feel about what I just said? And they say, I feel sad, Mom. I feel really sad. I go, it's okay. That makes sense that you feel sad. I want them to know. I want to check in. How do you feel about that? Seeing what they saw on television is very confusing for kids. It's confusing for adults. It's confusing for kids. And the first thing I say is, turn the TV off, because they can't process that. It's very overwhelming for them. And you can still have conversation. So just because the TV is off doesn't mean I'm not going to be having conversation. And we are going to be bringing this to the light. I recommend there's children's books that are good talking about this topic, that are specifically related to this topic, that I encourage people to have to talk about. That's important. And I think for the teens, the tweens and teens, it's important to talk about how they feel about connecting with people that are different than them. How do they feel? Do they feel like they know how to do that? Does that even bother them? A lot of them, it doesn't even bother. They don't see, it didn't for me as a child, but yet we have this piece in our society. A lot of people aren't conditioned that way, that they feel the difference. And so we talk about, how do you feel with someone that is different than you? And they say, it doesn't bother me. And we really go there. We really talk about it. Maybe there is something that bothers them. Let's get it out. Let's bring it on the table. This is a safe place for you to be real with your feelings. And then talking about that we all aren't raised the same way. We all don't come from the same background. We don't come from the same socioeconomic status. We don't come from the same families. We're all different. We all are different, and yet we all are humans at the same time. We all have come from generational challenges, legacies. This goes way, way back. And so we don't all come from the same backgrounds. We are all humans. Mm-hmm. And so we teach how to be loving to our kids, and we can also have boundaries at the same time. We can hold space for both. So if it doesn't mean I can be loving and not have boundaries, I can have both. We teach how to love and accept one another. We teach this in our family. It's a family value for us to embrace all different kinds of people that don't look the same, maybe act the same, vote the same. It doesn't matter. They're still humans. And so we value humanity, and there's a difference. So you have to look again. It's again, looking at your own biases, your own conditioning, your own programming, your own, what you bring to the table, because you can very quickly pass that on to your children if it's something you want to disrupt. Maybe it's something you've never really looked at. Maybe this is your chance to start looking at it, and where is this coming from? So again, not the expert. I know what it's like to create connection and process through the feelings that come with that, because everybody has different feelings. Every family has different feelings about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And they may not understand it. We may not understand it. So I like how you said, talk to people, ask questions. We're afraid. We're afraid we're going to look stupid. We're afraid we're going to offend somebody. We're afraid we're going to come across and say the wrong thing. So we don't say anything. We're scared. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Well, I think that was a really good perspective there, Kristen, too, about offending people. I think if you come from a place of genuine care and concern, people read that, and people know that you're not using a certain phrase incorrectly intentionally. So I think it's about prefacing, having those relationships, having honest conversations. And I know one of the things I took away from today is really sitting down with my kids and trying to bluntly explain what is happening and ask for their feelings. And like you said, kids are so resilient that they probably are so naive to a lot of that in the world and don't view it the same way that we have viewed it. So we're certainly going to challenge ourselves in the Jenson household this week to have some honest conversations with our kids. And I look forward to reporting back to you next week on kind of how that went, on just those basic conversations. Before we wrap up here today, I want to talk about some resources that you can get for folks around mental health. But I want the community to know, too, that our goal later this week is to offer up some resources that the community can lean on to learn more, to gather perspectives, to challenge your own thinking. So be aware of that coming from the city of Noblesville, that we're going to be offering up some different resources for the community to lean on. And we'd ask you to do that. But in the meantime, make sure you're checking on your friends and your neighbors and having some honest conversations. Kristen, around mental health, again, we are the sun is shining today. The weather is certainly helping a lot of us. Hopefully folks are getting outside more, getting out of their homes, still staying socially distant. We're still in the thick of that. We cannot ease up in that regard. So if folks are struggling with their mental health right now, if they are, whether it be COVID related, whether it be the news of today related, if they are kind of at wit's end, if you are internally ready to cry out for help, could you maybe outline some resources that people can lean on today to get some help?
Yeah, a couple in terms of mental health. Prevail, if you're suffering from any domestic violence situations, please call Prevail. They're wonderful. They will walk you through the process. Their number is 317-776-3472. We have the Disaster Distress Helpline at 1-800-985-5990. Also text if you need any kind of mental health support. You connect, it's called Connect, and then the number 741-741. So you type Connect, and then 741-741 is the number that you text. And they will be there 24/7 to help support you. And the last one is the Suicide Prevention Hotline. Please do not do this by yourself. You are worth it. You matter. You are important. Here's the number, 1-800-273-8255. We also have Brooks Place that deals with children in grief. There's many, many options out there for you. Please do not walk this alone. It's important. And what Maya Angelou once said, which still rings true for me, is when you know better, you do better. Mm-hmm. And this is the time to wake up, do your own work, check in, and don't go to sleep. This is an awakening for us. Awaken. Don't go to sleep. When we know better, we do better. This is the call for all of us today.
Well, and that's incredibly key. And as you've said many times before, Kristen, you and I are not experts in race relations, but we want to do our part today to have a conversation about it, to admit that we need to have more conversations about it. It goes hand in hand with mental health. It goes hand in hand with public safety. So we have to be there for one another. We have to do our own internal checks here today. And that's really what Mental Health Mondays are all about. So we're not going to shy away. Kristen, I know you've committed to join me throughout the summer on these conversations. So we're going to dive in. We're going to lean in on the topics of today. And we're going to have some awkward conversations, but I'm on board. I know you're on board. And I hope the community is on board as well. So again, please share this video with friends and neighbors if they need to hear it. Please look for more announcements from the city of Noblesville on some different resources that we're going to provide. But thank you, Kristen, again for your time away from your family and clients to be with us today to help spread this message. It means a lot.
Thank you so much. And I just hope we can, if it impacts one person, that makes all the difference in the world. So thank you,
100%.
everybody, for tuning in today. And just know you're not alone. We're here to help support you in whatever way we can.
We are all in this together. So everyone have a safe week and let us know how we can support you. And we'll look forward to seeing you back here next Monday at 11 a.m. for our next edition of Mental Health Mondays.